Hey everyone, Ryan here at Plague Scythe Studios. Welcome back to Soundcheck. Today, we are going full-blown sugar once again as we evaluate this trio of Djent-inspired pedals, particularly these outer ones, the Isosceles Boost by Dirt Monger Instruments. I became aware of this pedal about, 2 months ago or so, as I read a couple comments on my video saying, hey, these things are up for pre-order, they're coming out of Canada, and I think you should check them out. And I'm glad I did, because were I someone who is looking to buy these kind of pedals, and I say these kind because, well, you can buy other stuff that's going to sound like this, I would want to know some of the, shall we say, limitations, or at the very least, some of the inaccuracies when it comes to this particular pedal. And I'm, I think, one of only a few people that are creating content like this that's going to be able to judge it based on some of the other gear I have, in that way at least. So let's go ahead and take the cat out of the bag. What are these pedals? Well, all the pedals standing here before you today are essentially TC Electronic Integrated Preamp clones. And for those of you that are in the know, you've probably realized by now why there's a Chaosphere style logo on the front of all of these, because that is indeed the, it's not really a pedal since you can't turn it off, but the pedal-shaped object that Meshuggah used to boost their rhythm amplifiers on the albums Chaosphere, Destroy, Erase, Improve, the None EP, ranging all the way as far back to their first album. And of course, other bands were doing similar things, but that was like the best clean boost method at the time. And, you know, hitting a kind of chunky, not extremely articulate, but high gain amplifier with a ton of clean gain and rolling off the bass and, you know, preserving the highs on the guitar. And that's how they achieved that iconic sound. And they continue to use that up until they switched to Line 6 Veta heads. They were even boosting the original Pod Pro, as far as I understand. So that circuit is captured in here via a PedalPCB, well, PCB. The seller will make no reservations about letting you know that fact either. It's listed right in the title, which I appreciate. So he's sourcing all the PCBs and the components and assembling them in his own bare metal enclosure with laser etching. I quite like the look of these pedals. And, you know, you've got some modern conveniences compared to the integrated preamp. An actual foot switch, so you can actually true bypass this thing. You've got a standard 9-volt DC in, which actually steps up the internal voltage via a charge pump, its own little integrated circuit that does that to 33 volts. And that way, you know, you just use a regular pedal power supply. You don't have to worry about 18 volts or anything crazy like that. And you wrap all that up and compare it to the value of a used integrated preamp, if you can find one, and it just, you know, it slaughters it. You're looking at half the cost, if not less than half. And again, you can actually treat it as a pedal. But that's not the only trick up these two pedals sleeve. That's all this one does. But you might have noticed that these have a couple switches on the left and right sides, and that is for changing the mode of this pedal from the TC Electronic Integrated Preamp circuit to the Fortin 33 and Fortin grind circuits. Now, when you do that, of course, it turns off the bass and treble controls. They don't do anything because the grind and 33, well, they don't have bass treble controls. Now, as I alluded to earlier, we've discussed in detail how these things are modified, you know, TC/IP circuits themselves with fixed resistors and capacitors and a few changes here and there to kind of nail that curve. And all you have is output volume. And I gave my spiel as well about the very subtle differences between the 33 and the grind. And apparently, according to a couple sources who took a closer look than I did, it's down to like a single resistor and capacitor combination that scoops out a little bit more low content here, but raises the overall volume. It's kind of ridiculous in my opinion. But fortunately for those of us that are neurotic enough to care about those minor differences, the PCB designers were able to squeeze not only both Fortin pedals, but the original integrated preamp circuit in here as well, since they're sharing the same signal path. And it does the job. Let's just, go ahead and rip that Band-Aid off. It sounds really good. It does the, the 01011 thing. You put this through a chunky amp like a rectifier, or even something that doesn't necessarily need it, like a Mark IV. And even as you'll hear through some solid state amplifiers, it sounds absolutely killer. correct me if I'm off base here, but I'm going to guess that for a lot of you watching that are potentially, looking at buying one of these, you probably have one, maybe two high gain heads or combo amps you're looking to boost with this pedal, and you almost certainly don't already own an integrated preamp style pedal or a Fortin pedal, because it'd be kind of redundant. I was coming at this from the perspective that I've got this collector's item thing, and it'd be cool to have something that sounds like this without having to worry about scratching the paint and have all that in one package. So maybe you do own a Fortin pedal, but for a lot of you that don't, if I was coming from that perspective, I'd probably say 2 thumbs up. If you like this style of pedal, pick the one that you like. There's a couple other variations out there. Some manufacturers don't make them anymore, some do. But this one's, probably a safe bet. Unfortunately, because I do have these pedals to compare them to, I kind of have to take some marks off, and it's not Dirt Monger's fault, entirely, because he's sourcing a different PCB. And I did let him know about this problem, and we've had kind of extensive discussions around it. And furthermore, these pedals don't play nicely with one of my amps, and I'm not sure why, because they don't exhibit the same behavior as the Fortin pedals.
The next day.
So I'm recording this part about 12 hours after initially making this video, working on some pickup shots for cutaways and things that I need. And I believe I've discovered the specific set of factors that are making this pedal unhappy in the signal chain when I use it with my Cherrytone gargoyle. And I don't think this is going to affect many people, but I'm still going to throw this out here and let you listen to what it sounds like when you do have it set up in this situation, just in case one of you does use this sort of signal chain. So if I use anything other than this specific combination, it seems to not be an issue. But if I use my Voodoo Labs power supply, where I use all my other pedals on, and I plug it into my Delisle V4 Deluxe amp switch, and I have the ground switch set to up, which I normally wouldn't do, but in some cases I have to if I have certain stuff plugged in elsewhere and the ground loop's not happy, then I get the weird behavior that you're about to hear. However, if I change a single variable in that equation, the problem seems to disappear, which I swear to you was not the case just like 3 weeks ago when I was recording these initial demos for Dirt Monger. I was plugging straight into my amp. I was using like 3 different power supplies, still having the same issues. And today, it's just gone. So I don't know if it has something to do with the storms that have been rolling through, if the power grid's a little different or what. But that's all to say, I wouldn't expect any of this to be a problem for any regular setup. If you use a lot of, amp switching or patch bays or that kind of thing, then maybe this pedal has the potential to not play as nicely as the Fortin stuff. But with the conflicting evidence I'm gathering here, I'm starting to think that this is probably a very specific problem to my setup. So I'm going to include it anyway because this is it's the experience I had. But with that said, I think you're probably fine. So from this point forward in the video, if and when I do make an offhand comment about my concerns for this pedal's compatibility with other people's setups, I'm going to leave it in for thoroughness, but you can probably ignore it. I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Obviously, I reported this weird behavior to the pedal builder, and we had lots of great conversations regarding this pedal and other things that I hope to cover in the future. But his response was, maybe I did just screw something up. Human error, it happens. Let me send you a couple more. Let me send you another Isosceles to test, as well as just a different TC Electronic integrated preamp PCB. So this one, this doesn't have the Fortin stuff attached to it. And I told him this was kind of the one that I was more interested in anyway, since I do have the Fortin pedals, and it would be interesting to see if we could, kind of nail it down to one particular PCB design or a component or something like that. And unfortunately, they all kind of do the same shit. This one is by far the least bad of the bunch, but it still does that weird sound. They work fine with the Mesa amps. They sound great. And like I said, the Fortin pedals don't do that in front of this amplifier. Assuming this pedal plays nicely with your setup though, there's still something else you're bound to notice, at least in direct comparisons, and that is the Fortin modes. They're really close, but they're not perfect. The 33 is almost perfect. The EQ profile is very similar, but across all the modes, the output level just isn't quite high enough. Specifically with the grind pedal, it's not high enough on the high end. It kind of keeps up pretty closely with everything, you know, below that cutoff frequency, but by the time it starts to run away at like 1,000 hertz around that region, there's a really big detriment there compared to the real pedal. And it kind of sounds a little more muffled and less sharp because of that, which could work better for your rig, but I would still like more output. It's not a huge deal because I generally run both of these pedals at like 3 o'clock, and that's almost perfectly what max level is on these pedals. But if you do have an amplifier that prefers to have these things ran, you know, full throttle, you're not going to get as loud on these pedals, which is unfortunate. All the figures you've been seeing were captured using this particular Isosceles Boost. I did analyze the second one. It sounds the same. It pretty much looks the same. There's some pedal-to-pedal variance due to component tolerances, but that's what you should expect anyway when you buy one. The more interesting story to me is there was a small but significant gap in output volume between the integrated preamp mode on the Isosceles and the standalone clone, with this one being just a little louder, which I liked. The EQ profile is pretty much dead on in that bass at 0, treble at noon. In order to match the grind in 33, you'd actually have to roll this off a little bit, but I actually like it at noon a little better for the dual rectifier at least. And unfortunately, I don't have a real integrated preamp to compare against, but looking at the previous data I was provided on a video I did a while back, it does the thing. You know, again, I could probably stand a little bit more output level, but close enough. All these findings have made the conclusion of this video kind of a bitch, to be frank, because I'm having a hard time deciding how and where I can recommend these pedals to. I guess the easiest thing to start with is telling you what I'm going to do. Basically, the deal I have with Dirt Monger is that I paid for one of these pedals and I get to keep the one that I like the most. And I'm keeping the plain Jane TC Electronic integrated preamp clone. This is not for sale as of recording this video right now. He might have more models coming. But there are 2 or 3 of these on the store right now. If you do not care about that couple dB difference, then this is going to be fine for that sound. And as I've shown you, the 33 mode is damn close. The grind, not quite as close, at least on my pedals. But it gets you in the ballpark. I don't think you're going to hear that in, in a mix or especially in isolation and think, oh, that ain't a grind pedal. It pretty much sounds like one. So if you're okay with taking the risk that this might not play well with your British flavored amplifier, it's probably an easy recommendation. But this is one of those quality control things that it would bother me if I were, spending over $100 on a pedal. If nothing else, it did take a couple things away from this whole journey. First of which, don't fix what ain't broken. This is what, like a 30, 40-year-old circuit at this point, and it still slays. I don't understand why TC Electronic doesn't just reissue that as a pedal. They really need to. But here we are. Now we've got a clone market because of it. But because of that, this is probably the pedal I'm going to use, almost certainly the pedal I'm using to boost my rectifier on the next EP I'm working on, because it sounds awesome. And I like having that little bit of added treble content, a little bit more grit than the grind. So I'm just going to use that over it. And the other two will go back, and I'm sure he'll give them a nice look over and make sure everything's up to par, and then they'll be put on the marketplace for you guys. So that's pretty much that. Thank you so very much for watching. As always, any other questions and comments, especially regarding this thing, please leave them down below. I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say, and see you next time. Bye.